Hey everyone! So for today's video, I am going to be planting some cool weather fall crops, and not just any cool weather crops, but specifically rainbow varieties. So I have to say thank you to Park Seed because they actually sent out the seeds that I have. They let me choose the ones that I wanted, and I made my decision based entirely on what they looked like. So I guess I am a shallow gardener, but all of the ones that I got, so I got 3 different types of crops. I have carrots, radishes, and beets, and they are all rainbow varieties. So I have the carrot, it's just called Rainbow Blend. I think the same thing for the beets, it's the Beet Rainbow Blend. I'll put images on the screen because obviously when I'm sowing the seeds, you can't see what they're going to look like. And then the last one is the Radish Parks Beauty Blend. So all of these, fingers crossed, are going to be really colorful and beautiful. And I think there are 200 seeds in each packet. I'm not going to plant 200 of each. I'm probably going to plant maybe a little bit less than half. And then there's a community garden that I'm going to try to donate the rest of the seeds to. But a little bit about cool weather crops in general, because I don't know if this was just me or if it is common, but before I really started getting into gardening, I didn't know that you didn't just plant everything at once. I thought everything was planted kind of after the last frost, it grew in the summer, and then it died in the fall. And when I found out there were actually crops that I could sow early after I'd been stuck inside for a long winter and actually have some things to harvest. My cat is climbing on a screen. Let me go get him down. This is the kitty, Jack, that is the sweetest boy, but will break and destroy every single thing we have in the house. You may now be released. So like I was saying, before I started really getting into gardening, I didn't know there was such a thing as a cool weather crop. So you can actually be harvesting stuff, I think in April is when I could start harvesting some of the radishes. So cool weather crops work best in the spring and the fall. And I've typically had, I'd say, better luck with the fall, because I find that in the spring, especially the last couple years, it'll get too hot too quickly and then the cool weather crops can bolt. I've had a huge issue with that, especially with broccoli, whereas in the fall, I feel like, again, fingers crossed, that the weather is more stable. So you start warmer, which makes the seeds germinate faster, and then you get that more steady progression of cooling off temperatures. Now this spring of 2022 was an especially odd year. In fact, radishes, which are, I would say, the easiest crop to grow because it's only 30 days about from sowing the seed until actually harvesting a radish that's ready to eat. So typically those worked every spring, but our spring this year, it was like constantly 40, which wasn't really warm enough for the seeds to germinate right away and start to grow. And then it seemed like it jumped into 70. And a lot of these cool weather crops really prefer temperatures in like the 50s to low 60s. And we just didn't really have that this spring. So I didn't even get a spring harvest of radishes. In fact, I don't think any of my spring crops really did well. Especially too in a container garden, I have to get the crops out to make room for my summer annuals and plants. So I needed to pull out my radishes and it was kind of sad. So I'm hoping that this fall things go a lot smoother. Now it does feel a little bit odd to be starting to plant these today as it is 91 degrees, which is why I'm inside in the air conditioning before I go outside to actually plant. But that is typical for August. And yes, you do want to start sowing your cool weather crops in early August. In fact, this is when I like to use it. I mentioned this before, and Park Seed actually owns this app, but it is the From Seed to Spoon app. So Seed to Spoon was its own independent company. I've been using this app for, I guess, since 2019, since I first started gardening, and then it was purchased by Park Seed. So there's been a lot of improvements to the app, but this is what I use to know when to start my cool weather crops. I'd say for the warm weather crops, it's not as difficult for me to remember because you basically get them outside after last frost. But with cool weather crops, knowing to start it however many weeks before your last frost and then however many weeks before your first frost can get a little confusing. So I'll put some screenshots up here, but essentially if I search for beets on this app, it'll tell me that, so if I was to plant in the spring, it would be from February 28th, I mean that is super early to start planting seeds outside, to March 28th, and then for fall, which is what we're doing now, it is July 26th till August 23rd. So you do want to start thinking this month in August about starting to sow your cool weather crops. And I sow all of mine directly. I am past the point of starting seeds inside. I do that in the spring. Can't be bothered as we go further into the season. And also, I basically plant these seeds wherever I've already pulled stuff. So almost all of my containers are full. And I've had to pull, I pulled some poppies. What else did I pull? Did I pull a melon plant? I definitely pulled some more flowers. So basically any container that had something in the summer that I pulled either because it's kind of outlived its life or there was something wrong with it, I now have those empty containers. I have refreshened the soil just a little bit and I'm going to put my seeds in there. So now I think it is time to go out into this heat and get these fall crops sown. So we are on the back deck, which is where I'm going to be planting and keeping most of the fall crops, just mostly for space reasons. Here are the empty containers. I have one more up front that I'll plant last, but basically I think there were morning glories in here, and I cannot for the life of me remember what I pulled from these three. But essentially I removed the plants and none of them had a really large root system, so I just broke up whatever soil was in there, added some bagged compost that I have, and mixed that together. So that's how I refresh my soil in between plantings. So I didn't add any new soil, I just added compost to the existing soil. Now I think what I'm going to do is radishes in this flower box because this is the shallowest of the containers and that doesn't need as much depth as carrots or beets. Then I think I'm going to do carrots in that container because it kind of goes in a little bit more narrow, and with beets I want to keep the container a little bit wider, so I'm going to do carrots and carrots. So two things carrots, one for the beets, and then I'll also do beets in the container up front that had the poppies in it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start sowing these seeds. One thing I will do is I like to get the soil moist first because I find it's a little bit easier to plant the seeds. So I'm going to moisten the soil, plant the seeds, and then give it another good drink after I get the seeds sown. So we'll go ahead and I'll probably start first with the radishes. Alright, so we're going to start with the radishes first, and again this is called the Parks Beauty Blend, and I have the list here that says which varieties are specifically in this mix. So we have Round Scarlet Beauty, we have Rich Purple Beauty, Pastel Pink, Pure White Round, and Bright Yellow Heirloom variety. So there's 5 different varieties in here. We'll see how much of each we get, but I am super excited to get these planted. Now with radishes, you typically want to sow the seeds about a ½ inch deep, and you want to plant them about 1 inch apart, but what I do is I basically just scatter the seeds, and then once they start to sprout, I will then thin them to about 1 inch apart. So I am going to moisten the soil a little bit, spread these around. I'll then put a fresh layer of soil on top, about a ½ inch deep, and then we will give them another good soaking. Radishes are done, and I would say I planted maybe a little bit less than half, and like I said, I'm going to try to donate the other half of the radishes, but because they also have a very short maturity cycle, you can go ahead and sow them like 10-15 days apart and just continue to get a bunch of radishes to harvest throughout the season. So that is my plan for the radishes. Now we will go ahead and plant up the carrots. So I'm going to put carrots in these 2 containers, so 1 grow bag, 1 of the regular pots here. And again, this is the Rainbow Blend carrots from Park Seed. And these I'm going to, again, sprinkle the seeds on the top, but they do need light to germinate. So I'm just going to very lightly cover them with a very, very, very fine layer of soil on top. get them thoroughly watered in, and then figure out the permanent spot for them as well. Carrots are all sown, so last I'm going to finish up with the beets, and again this is the beet rainbow blend. I'm going to do part in this grow bag and then the rest in one of the pots up front in the front garden. So everything's going to be back here except for one pot of beets. Now ideally, so beets have to be spaced the furthest apart, comparing radishes, carrots, and beets, because they grow the largest. So I'm not going to get as many beets using just a 5-gallon grow bag as I would, for example, radishes. Ideally, I would like to plant these in a raised bed, but I don't have any raised bed space available. So I am going to put them in just a couple pots. I might not get, a ton of beets, but a few is better than none at all. So these also are larger seeds, so they're easier for me to space initially when I'm planting them than just sprinkling them on the top like the carrots or the radishes. Also, another issue I've had personally is not sowing my beet seeds deep enough. So I tend to go even more towards like 3/4 to an inch deep, because if not, I have a bunch of floppy beet seedlings that I didn't have to kind of pile soil around as well. So for this one, will stick my finger in about 1 inch deep, put the seeds in, cover them up, and then water them in again. So we'll go ahead and get these all sown as well. So here we are, all the containers that are sown so far. So I have beets, 2 carrots, and the radishes. I'm not going to label because I'm going to tell myself right now I will remember. We'll see if that's actually true or not. But that's where these, I think, are going to live out here on the back deck. So now we'll go up to the front and get the rest of the beets sown. Here's the container that had the poppies in it. It's just basically been sitting empty since then. So as a little closer up look of what I do, I just take my finger and then go just about down to the first knuckle, because I feel like that's about 1 inch. Poke, 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 poke. Then I'm just going to drop 2 or 3 of the seeds in each hole. So I'd estimate I was in the direct sun for about 3 minutes just sowing those last beet seeds, because everything in the back deck, at least where I was working, was in the shade. But I am covered in sweat just from those few minutes of direct sunlight. So everything now is sown for the fall. I will keep you updated on how they do. I'm really hoping that I have much better luck in the fall than I did this past spring. It does seem like the weather, at least the last few years, has been a bit more predictable in the fall compared to spring, so I think I have that going for me. But I will, of course, keep you updated as far as how these do. Now, some other things I have planned for the fall, once I start to get some of the flowers out of the raised beds, I'm definitely going to plant probably more radishes, just because they have such a short maturity cycle. I'm definitely going to plant some snap peas. I have a few ideas for those that I'm excited about. I'll probably plant some greens, then I'll probably just add some cool weather flowers as well. Oh, and I will be, once again, planting up my raised beds in October, late October, early November, with tulips again for next year. So that's kind of the plan for, I guess, what's going to be happening as far as planting for the rest of the year. But right now, I'm still very much in maintenance mode for all of the warm weather plants. So that's going to be everything for this video. Let me know if you've started your cool weather crops yet, and if so, what you are growing. And other than that, I will see you in the next video.